Hi, welcome to Outside the Center Playground Safety. I'm Irene Jones and I'm from Marshall+Sterling's Child Welfare Specialty Insurance Program. And today we're going to talk about safety in the playground. And the question I want to ask each and every one of you as teachers is, how would you feel if one of the children that is in your classroom got injured or even, heaven forbid, passed away due to a playground injury? How would you feel if you're a parent, if you got a call from the school and said your child was hurt or injured or, heaven forbid, passed away due to a playground injury? That's perspective, the worst case scenario I want you all to think about today, because the good news is that as caregivers to children, you have a lot of things that you can do both as individuals, as a team, and as an organization that can prevent injuries from occurring. You do have a moral and a legal obligation to the children in your care, and I know it's really important to you, otherwise you wouldn't be in the field that you're in. So we're going to give you some tools to make it a safer playground for the kids in your program. Like I said, my name is Irene Jones. I have been working in the insurance industry for nearly 20 years in the past. Since 2005, I've worked mainly with organizations serving children, whether they're daycare, social service agencies, youth recreation programs. And over the course of that time, I've seen a lot of different situations come up. And I'll tell you some stories today about my experiences. I worked across the country, so these are incidents that happen to people that you would never know, but could be somebody in Wisconsin or California or New York or Florida. I also grew up in a teaching family, so have some personal experience as well that I will share with you. So let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to go over today in this program are the 3 most frequent causes of playground injuries, the #1 cause of deaths on playgrounds, and what you can do to prevent injuries and deaths from occurring in your playground. So we're going to give you some tools to prevent harm from occurring. Now, every year, over 200,000 children are sent to the ER due to injuries that they receive at a playground. You can see that falls are 44% of injuries, equipment-related hazards are 23%, and entrapment and collisions are 23%. How many of you have had a child who tripped and fell running out to the playground? How many of you have gone out to the playground and inspected the equipment and found a sharp, jagged edge? How many of you have had a child that got stuck in some equipment somehow and was starting to panic? These are the most common causes of injuries. As you can see, by far, falls are the most common cause of injuries at playgrounds. So we're going to talk to you today a lot about falls and about some of the other things that you can do that are preventative measures. The first thing that is within your control is to be active, be intentional, constantly be watching. What we want to do as caregivers for children is remember that the risks that they face, you're responsible for. So your organization is having you watch this training video because they're concerned about the safety of the children. And they're also saying to you as educators, as teachers, as caregivers, that you're responsible. So what I'm saying to you is each one of us is a risk manager. These kids are facing risks on the playground, and I'm ordaining you each risk managers to sort of watch over the kids. So the first thing that you can do is constantly be monitoring. When you're out in the playground, you usually have a partner there with you from your teaching team. Make sure that you have a game plan set up where that you're watching different areas, that you're looking in different corners together. This is not a time to be chatting or talking. And one of the things that you can do as you build the culture in your organization is say to the other person, we really need to be watching this. Or if somebody new comes on, when we go out and we do playground duty, we're actively watching, and this is how we do it at our school. And we're proud of how we do it because we're helping the kids be safe. So some of the things you want to look for are blind spots, constantly be scanning right to left, constantly be scanning right to left, up, down, moving around so that when you're looking at things from different angles, you avoid some of the blind spots. And depending on how your playground is situated, and also think about your home playground, and if you're using a playground on a field trip, which is going to be a different environment, think about any hidden corners where there could be somebody who has a bad intention, who's going to sneak a child like behind a dumpster or something like that, because that's another thing. We don't want a child to get abused or molested or kidnapped from the playground area. So those are the things to be looking at. And also make eye contact with the children. Let them know you're in charge. Let them know you're watching. Really important. Let me tell you a story about one playground incident where there was a little boy who was on a climber, and at first he climbed up and he was hanging down from the area that he was supposed to be hanging down from, and then he sort of skinched over to the side, and there was a teacher who said to him, "Listen, that's not the right way to play on that equipment, you have to move over." He moved over. He did it, went up again, up on the climber, skinches over to the side, she tells him again, he moves over. Then she goes and she makes her rounds around the playground. By the time she comes back, he fell to the ground, broke his arm. Well, that particular playground was on tape, and that's how we know exactly what happened. But when you have an incident with somebody who's a child like that, you're the adult, he's the child. You got to take control of the situation and remove him from it. You know, if he went over twice, you all know he's going to do it a third time. You know better than I do because you work with the kids every day, and that's just human nature. So being aware, making contact, taking control of the situation, constantly scanning, and monitoring everything. And by the way, in that particular incident, I will tell you that the videotape was actually erased in error by a staff, which you just can't make this stuff up. So I want to let you know that one of your responsibilities as a staff member is completing incident reports when something happens, and you're responsible to make sure that the documents, whether it's film or reports or whatever, are kept for the school so that you can report any incidents to the authorities, including your insurance carrier. Okay, some things that you can do when you're thinking about supervision. Enforce use of proper equipment. That's a big deal. Posting the rules. Talking to the kids about the rules. Talking to your fellow teachers about the rules. Supervising children in high problem areas. The end of slides is a big area. The swing sets is another big area. Kids like to climb up slides. They like to run in front of the swings. Good way to get kicked in the head. You know, basic things that we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but make sure that you're constantly looking and checking in those areas. And remember too that if children are hanging off a part of the climber, like that little boy in the story, he wasn't in the main part of the climber, he was hanging off to the side. The reason he got injured was where he fell, there was nothing to protect him. So when you see any children that are using playground equipment and it's not in the right way, that's a red flag that you can't have that tolerated, and you've got to establish that, especially in the beginning of the school year and when you go back out again frequently in the spring. You've got to establish that there's absolutely zero tolerance for incorrect use of playground equipment. So what could happen to a child if they fall? Well, did you know that falling from 8 feet onto dirt is the same as hitting a brick wall at 30 miles per hour? Concussions are a huge concern, and you know it's something that is being screened for more and more with sports, but it's a frequent incident in playgrounds as well. So it's really important to limit the amount of impact that children have. So we're going to talk a little bit about ground cover at the playground, what to look for, and how that can help you do a better job. Okay, so we've talked about how falls are the major cause of injuries with kids on playgrounds. So let's talk about the surfacing, because that's a great way that you can keep your playground safe. First thing I have here is this is 12 inches of mulch. So that's how deep 12 inches of mulch is. And the first thing that comes to mind is it always gets kicked away underneath of the swings. So that's something when you're monitoring the playground that you can report in that it needs to be raked back over there so that it's a full 12 inches. Especially the swings is a place where there's common kids, flying off the front of the swings, etc. But I'm going to show you some of the other playground materials as well, because you can use mats, you can use different safety tested materials, and there's just a number of products out there on the market today. So a lot of times what you'll see is these beautiful designs. I mean, some of these playgrounds are actually really cool. They can be, and all sorts of colors and reds and browns and blues and greens, all different things. But this, see how this is green on top? What's underneath is really thick, and it's engineered for safety and for impact. So that, it doesn't even feel that soft when you're stepping on it, but remember, when you fall from 8 feet onto dirt, it's like hitting a brick wall at 30 miles per hour. So this is engineered for the impact to keep the kids safe. Let me show you a couple of other ones. And I love this because I love the colors. So you can pick all the different colors that you want, and then it goes on top of the safety playground material. And this one has a different design, and it actually feels a little bit squishier, but it feels squishy on the bottom. On the top, it's real firm. So that's the stuff that you're seeing out there. I have a couple other samples in here. Here's some others that are just showing the depth of it. And there's even, sometimes you'll have material, it'll look like fake grass that goes on top of some of these engineered materials. So something to look for as you're going through the playgrounds, especially, you know what your home playground is like. If you're going to be building a playground, talk about it. If you're going out on a field trip, look for these things. Some other things that you want to keep in mind, you want to extend the surfacing 6 feet in all directions. You want to have 9 feet between structures. And exposed concrete footings are a major cause of injury, so you want to make sure that that they're off to the side where there's going to be any play at all, so that the kids don't fall onto the concrete footings. Another thing to think about is just really basic debris, needles, bottle caps, broken glass. Always checking through, especially, and that's one of the disadvantages of the mulch, is that can kind of sink deep into that. So that's something you want to be more careful of. Of course, the advantage of the mulch is that it's pretty accessible. If you go into some of this engineered equipment, it can be expensive, but it's also a really good investment and it has a long life term. So again, make sure that you're looking for glass, bottle caps, needles, trash, anything in the playground, and you should be doing that on a regular basis when you're scanning the kids before you go out and when you come in, that you're daily monitoring the playground ground cover as part of your daily operations. Okay, so now what else can you do? Simple child care technique: divide children into different age groups, and certain equipment is more suitable to different age groups anyway. So if you have a playground that has 2 different sets of equipment, make sure that children are playing on age-appropriate structures. We want to be careful that there's not too much interaction between the 2 groups. Running back and forth, increased chance of collision is an issue too. So at your playground, you could post signs about who should play where. You can also have paths, build paths and buffer zones with hedges and things like that. And definitely want to make sure that there's guardrails on elevated surfaces. Another thing that you can do with signs at playground is post your rules, especially for the public. Even if you don't have a playground that is meant to be public access, a lot of times what I find at schools and at organizations is that there's really no realistic way to fence it off and lock it off. So if that's the case, you might want to post some simple rules like open dawn to dusk, no weapons or alcohol at the playground, whatever you think is right for your school. But that is probably a pretty good thing to discuss amongst yourselves. Do you have any issues in that area? Is that something that you want to improve on? What about how is your communication on site with the children and with the teachers? This is something that you want to work on as a group. And again, you're all risk managers, so every single person, whether you're an assistant teacher, a teacher, or a director, this is a great thing to talk about where there might be gaps. We want you to feel like you can be comfortable speaking up and bringing things to the attention of the school leadership. Believe me, they need each and every one of you to be an active partner in this. And if you're out there monitoring the playground every day, monitoring the children's activity every day, you're going to have a better idea of what's really needed to protect the kids. So please speak up, talk about it, and make a plan for your rules, your signs, and your procedures. Okay, so let's think about the equipment a little bit. Equipment checking is really important. The leading cause of deaths at playgrounds is strangulation. It can be as soon as 7 seconds that you can start to lose consciousness. Up to a minute of being strangled, you start to lose consciousness. You pass away a couple minutes after that. And when I was growing up, I unfortunately had a really good friend who had a little brother who had received a toy at the holiday time, and it was a toy that included a rope. And he went upstairs to his room to play with that rope, and he got caught in the rope, and he was strangled. And his mother found him, and she was an RN, and she tried to revive him, but he was gone. He was completely gone. I never, ever want to see that any one of you is put in that position to have a child pass away in front of you, whether it's your own child or someone at your school. It's just a terrible, terrible situation. And, you know, you feel awful for the child, you feel awful for the family, and you're going to constantly be asking yourself, what could I have done? So, some things that you can look for. We know strangulation is the leading cause of death in playground accidents. Drawstrings on the hoodies. The drawstrings are what cause the problem. Inspect the kids' clothing. Really important. Watch for the area on the tops of the slides, because they get caught, it strangles them, and that's where the problems come in. So again, when you're walking around and you're doing your rounds and you're looking at the playground from different directions, you're making eye contact with the kids, you're doing your checks with your playground partner, you know, watch for these things, the top of the slides. Be aware of who has any drawstrings on there, and that's one way that you can definitely make it safer, so that you never ever have to be in that situation. Okay, continuing with equipment checking. Look for places that kids can get trapped. Did you ever notice that kids' heads are sometimes a lot bigger than their bodies? And it's with some kids it's just really obvious. It's just the way that they are. But if you think about it, it's an issue. Because, you know, kids will, one part of them can get in and then they can't get out, and you know, you want to look at some of the common problem areas are guardrails and underneath merry-go-rounds. Here's the rule of thumb. If the space between two parts is more than 3.5 inches, then it has to be greater than 9 inches to avoid entrapment. And this is because, you know, kids obviously are always trying to stick their hands different places. They're exploring life. That's natural. But 3.5 inches and smaller is too small to really get anything else in. 3.5 inches to 9 inches, that little gap there, that's when you can get it in, but you can't get it out. I mean, I remember one time when we were growing up, there was a little boy who, they were doing some repairs on the street, and he stuck his hands into a hole in the ground. And he couldn't get it out. We had to call the police to have come get it out and get the Wesson oil on him and lube him up and pull him out. I mean, it was really upsetting. And I was watching this as a little kid, and it brings up, and I've had other people share stories with me as I've been teaching this class, like it brings up this whole fear factor. It's really upsetting to be trapped in something. It's almost like that feeling of being enclosed, like you don't want to be trapped in the trunk of a car sort of thing. And when you get your hand or your head, even worse, like stuck under a merry-go-round, that's a terrible feeling. And some of the stories that have been shared with me of teachers in that situation is kind of doing the mental check of saying, okay, I'm starting to feel scared, but you know what, I'm going to remain calm because the child is going to pick up on my energy. So even if, and that's part of the reason we have a class like this, not that we're telling you things that we're telling you things you're probably already doing, right? But it's to reinforce what the best practices are and to think through some of the worst case scenarios so you can react calmly. So if you, well, I think most people are like, I wouldn't want to be trapped in something, but if you think to yourself, okay, I know from my training that if somebody gets trapped, I'm going to remain calm and just let them know, you know what, we're going to hang out here for a while, and we're going to have a special visit from the fire department. It's going to be great, and they're going to come over and help us and get you out. But it's all how you react. And if you need to, if for some reason you have like an issue with that, if you need to have someone come in and replace you who is a little bit calmer, that's okay too. I mean, you can assign people in your group who would be primary in an emergency after, obviously after they come on the scene. But that's a big deal. So remember, when you're looking to look at the guardrails underneath the merry-go-rounds, and think about, if the gap is greater than 3.5 inches, you have to make it all the way out to 9 inches in order for it to be safe. So that's something for everybody to look at and to talk about at your school. Okay, what else to look for with equipment? Sharp points and edges. Some of the things that come up are in the winter, certain plastic pieces freeze and then melt, and then not freeze and then unfreeze, freeze and then unfreeze, and they can crack and break off, and then there'll be sharp metal pieces underneath. Wood can splinter, all sorts of things like that. So you don't want kids to impale themselves running into something, or even have their clothing get caught on something. So that's something that you should be monitoring on a regular basis. Always looking for rusted metal, splintering wood, plastic with holes in it. Constantly, as you're going through the playground, and I think it actually makes it more interesting to think, okay, here's my checklist of the things I need to look for. And that's another great idea, is to have a pre-playground inspection checklist, just to look at the ground cover and look at the equipment, and then also look at the children, again looking for the drawstrings, which is a major cause of strangulation. So just having a simple checklist like that is a great idea. So just to recap, you're all in a position where you can help children be safe on the playground. You're all helping the kids manage the risk. They're depending on you. You guys are the adults. And by doing that, you're taking care of the kids, you're taking care of your professional duty, your moral obligation, and you're helping your organization thrive by doing a great job. We've given you some ideas about what you can do. Constantly be looking, what the standards are for best practices for having a safe playground, and what you can do to prevent harm from occurring. So, hopefully at this point, what you could do is talk amongst yourselves and share your experiences on the playground. Talk about what maybe specific actions you can do as a group to improve the safety, whether it's a physical amendment to the playground itself, like the ground cover, improving the ground cover, or if it's maybe a procedure you want to put into place, or new signage. Work together. I encourage you to work together and to be transparent. Don't feel like you can't speak up, and directors and managers, talk to your team and encourage everybody that we're all in this together, and that it's okay to bring up issues that need to be addressed, because the children are first and foremost. I never ever want to have any of you in a situation where you're calling my offices and saying, a child got injured or heaven forbid passed away on the playground. Listen, we know playground injuries are frequent because kids are kids. So I don't want you to feel like nothing's ever going to happen. It's going to happen. I've been in the industry a long time. It's just something that does happen. What we want to do is minimize the impacts of if a child falls. They're not getting majorly injured. They don't need to go to the emergency room. That there's no deaths. That there's no major problems. And that, I think, is something that is really within reach. Thank you.